The Valdorian armada emerged from hyperspace like a storm of living metal, their biomechanical ships pulsing with organic light against the star-scattered void. 300 vessels, each one a masterpiece of conquest technology, arranged themselves in perfect formation above Earth's blue marble surface. Commander Zethkar, veteran of 17 planetary subjugations, stood in the command nexus of the mothership Dominion's edge, his 4 arms manipulating holographic displays with practiced efficiency. His exoskeleton, a deep purple that indicated high military rank among his species, gleamed under the bridge's bioluminescent panels. Compound eyes, each containing thousands of individual lenses, focused on the primitive world below with something approaching boredom. Earth represented Conquest Number 18, a routine operation scheduled to last no more than 72 standard cycles. Preliminary scans complete, Commander, reported War Tactician Vexmol, his cranial tendrils writhing with anticipation. The indigenous species, these humans, possess nuclear capability but lack energy shielding, quantum communications, or gravitational manipulation. Their most advanced weapons are approximately 4 centuries behind our baseline technology. Zethkar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The pattern was always identical: arrive with overwhelming force, demonstrate superior firepower, accept surrender, establish occupation protocols. 17 worlds had followed this precise sequence. The few species that initially resisted soon realized the mathematical impossibility of victory and submitted to preserve their populations. Begin Phase 1 bombardment, he commanded, his voice carried through the ship's neural network to all vessels simultaneously. Target military installations, communication hubs, and transportation nodes. Standard doctrine. Eliminate organized resistance capability while preserving population centers for future integration. The sky above Earth erupted in deadly beauty. Plasma lances, each containing enough energy to vaporize a city block, streaked downward like falling stars. Pentagon vanished in a pillar of superheated gas. NORAD became a glass crater. Naval fleets across Earth's oceans simply ceased to exist, their hulls atomized before crews could process what was happening. Satellite networks died in cascading failures. GPS went dark. Internet backbone infrastructure melted into silicon soup. Within 6 standard cycles, humanity's global communication and defense infrastructure had been reduced to scattered, isolated fragments. Zethkar observed the destruction with clinical detachment, already mentally composing his victory report to the High Council. The tactical displays showed exactly what he expected. 67% of human military capacity eliminated, command structures severed, survivors likely in shock and preparing surrender negotiations. But then something unprecedented appeared on his screens. Commander, Vexmol's mental emanations carried confusion thick enough to taste. The humans, their response patterns are irregular. Instead of attempting communication or surrender signals, scattered units are reorganizing. Zethkar's 4 eyes focused on the tactical hologram with sharp attention. Across Earth's surface, tiny clusters of human activity were emerging from underground installations, forest hideouts, urban ruins. Rather than seeking shelter or attempting escape, these groups appeared to be adapting. Explain the anomaly, he demanded. Sir, in the North American sector, surviving military units are establishing new command structures within hours of losing their primary bases. European resistance cells are already modifying our weapon signatures into their defense algorithms. Most peculiar, Asian populations are demonstrating coordinated civilian-military integration despite severed communication lines. Zethkar's exoskeleton darkened to confused brown. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever exhibited organized military response after losing 2/3 of their defensive capability. The logical behavior was immediate surrender to prevent further casualties. Perhaps, he mused, watching small human icons multiply across his display, they simply haven't calculated the mathematical certainty of their defeat. Increase bombardment intensity. Once they understand the impossibility of victory, they'll behave rationally. But deep in his primary brain, a small cluster of neurons fired with something Zethkar had never experienced in 17 previous conquests: uncertainty. Captain Maria Rodriguez pressed a blood-soaked rag against her forehead, the makeshift bandage already saturated from the shrapnel wound she'd sustained during the Denver Federal Building collapse. Her left arm hung in a crude sling fashioned from parachute cord and torn fabric, the shoulder blade fractured when the blast wave had hurled her 20 feet into concrete rubble. Her right leg dragged slightly, torn ligaments that would have required months of physical therapy in peacetime, but now merited only a salvaged knee brace and handfuls of scavenged painkillers. By every military medical standard, she should have been evacuated to a hospital. By Valdorian tactical assessments, she should have been classified as a non-combatant casualty. Instead, she stood hunched over a radiation-scarred conference table in what had once been Denver's emergency management bunker, 3 stories beneath the city's demolished civic center, planning humanity's counterattack with the focused intensity of a chess grandmaster. Ammunition status report, she demanded, her voice hoarse from inhaling concrete dust and alien plasma residue during the initial bombardment. Lieutenant Johnson limped forward, his own injuries a catalogue of human resilience, second-degree burns covering 30% of his torso from the first day's attacks, a missing left eye socket covered by medical gauze, and fingers on his right hand fused together from plasma exposure. He carried a tablet computer held together with electrical tape and determination. Conventional munitions at 38% of pre-war levels, ma'am. But Sergeant Williams has been reverse engineering their energy weapons with help from some MIT refugees. Turns out their plasma rifles operate on surprisingly simple principles. We're manufacturing compatible power cells from car batteries and microwave components. Maria nodded, studying tactical maps drawn in charcoal on concrete walls. 3 weeks into what the aliens had expected to be a 72-hour conquest, and humanity was not merely surviving, they were adapting, evolving, learning from every mistake at a pace that would have impressed Darwin himself. What about personnel? She asked, watching a young corporal, barely 18, walking on a prosthetic leg carved from a table leg and secured with climbing rope, plot enemy patrol routes with mechanical precision. We've got 237 active combatants in the Denver sector, Johnson reported. 86 are classified as walking wounded by pre-war standards, but they're all requesting frontline assignments. The civilians have been extraordinary. We've got accountants manufacturing explosives, teachers running reconnaissance missions, and retired engineers building communication arrays from salvaged electronics. Above their heads, the distinctive whine of Valdorian hover scouts swept across the ruins. The aliens were conducting their 4th patrol sweep of the day, searching for resistance cells with increasingly desperate intensity. Their tactical doctrine assumed that decimating infrastructure would collapse human organization. They hadn't anticipated that humans would simply create new infrastructure from the wreckage of the old. "Ma'am," called Corporal Martinez, his voice tight with pain from the deep laser burns across his back, "we've got movement." Valdorian Ground Patrol, 6 units, heading toward the old library stronghold. Maria's expression transformed into something that would have sent ice through alien veins had they understood human facial expressions, a smile that contained equal parts anticipation and controlled fury. "Outstanding. Signal all units, wounded or not, everyone who can hold a weapon participates in this engagement. It's time to show these bastards that hurting us just makes us more dangerous." The underground bunker filled with the quiet sounds of humans preparing for war, weapons being checked, improvised armor being adjusted, and wounded soldiers helping each other to their feet with the grim determination of a species that had discovered something profound about itself. The Valdorians had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had assumed that damaged soldiers were defeated soldiers. They had never encountered a species that treated injuries not as reasons to surrender, but as motivation to fight harder. High Commander Zethkar's 4 arms gestured in increasingly agitated patterns as he paced the length of his command chamber, his normally immaculate exoskeleton now showing stress marks, dark purple veins that betrayed deep psychological disturbance. The holographic display dominating the center of the room projected a 3-dimensional map of Earth, but instead of the expected blue-green of pacified territory, angry red dots pulsed across every continent like a viral infection. There should have been no red dots. After 4 standard weeks of occupation, there should have been nothing but the orderly green glow of conquered territory and the occasional yellow indicator marking minor cleanup operations. Explain to me, he demanded of his senior staff, his mental emanations crackling with frustration that his subordinates could taste in the recycled atmosphere, how a species sustaining 78% casualty rates continues coordinated military operations across multiple continents simultaneously. War analyst Keelnetha's cranial tendrils writhed with equations and probability matrices, his biocomputer brain working overtime to process data that defied every conquest algorithm the Valdorian Empire had developed over 3 millennia of galactic expansion. Commander, our behavioral prediction models indicate complete statistical breakdown. By all mathematical certainties, these humans should have initiated surrender protocols after suffering losses exceeding 50%. Every species we have previously encountered follows logical preservation patterns: minimize suffering, preserve population, accept defeat when victory probability drops below 12%. Yet these humans, science observer Nextol interjected, his 6 eyes cycling through spectral analysis modes as he reviewed battlefield recordings, demonstrate inverse correlation between damage sustained and surrender likelihood. Yesterday's incident in the Australian sector provides disturbing evidence. A human soldier, designation Marine, detonated an improvised explosive device while missing both legs below the knee, one arm completely severed, and suffering from severe plasma burns across 40% of his torso. Zethkar's exoskeleton shifted to the deep purple of profound confusion, a color so rare among Valdorian military personnel that some of his staff had never witnessed it. Perhaps their pain reception differs from our neural architecture. Or they possess some form of damage resistance that our scanners cannot detect. Negative on both hypotheses, Commander, Nextol replied, his tentacles manipulating holographic data streams. Detailed physiological analysis indicates human pain sensitivity actually exceeds our own by approximately 23%. Their neural pathways show identical distress responses to tissue damage. Furthermore, cognitive assessment protocols confirm problem-solving capabilities equal to, and in some categories, superior to, our species' average. They possess complete awareness of their tactical situation's hopelessness. A new report materialized in the Chamber Center, live surveillance footage from ground reconnaissance units. The images showed scenes that violated every principle of military logic. Humans emerging from destroyed structures, some supporting comrades who should have been classified as combat incapable, others fashioning weapons from debris while nursing injuries that would have hospitalized Valdorian warriors for weeks. Most disturbing was their apparent emotional state. Rather than the despair and resignation that characterized defeated populations, these humans displayed something Valdorian psychology had no framework to comprehend. They appeared to derive energy from adversity. Commander, Vexmol's voice carried unprecedented uncertainty. Perhaps we should requisition xenopsychology specialists from the core worlds. These behavioral patterns exceed our current analytical capabilities. Zethkar studied footage of a human female, her face half covered in medical wrappings, directing construction of defensive positions while leaning heavily on an improvised crutch. She should have been seeking medical treatment. Instead, she seemed to be teaching others how to build better fortifications. Request approved, he said quietly. And send a priority message to High Command. Classification, unprecedented anomaly. Subject, species that becomes more dangerous when damaged. For the first time in his distinguished military career, High Commander Zethkar was beginning to understand that the universe contained forms of logic his species had never encountered. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked by the flickering light of salvaged emergency candles in what had once been Boston General Hospital's trauma center, now reduced to a skeletal framework of twisted steel and shattered concrete. Her medical degree, 20 years of education and experience, felt simultaneously useless and absolutely essential as she performed surgery with kitchen knives sterilized over open flames, treating third-degree plasma burns with torn bedsheets, and setting broken bones with splints carved from chair legs. Her own body bore the marks of the hospital's destruction. Chronic pain radiated from her right shoulder where falling debris had crushed the joint during the initial bombardment. her left hand remained partially paralyzed from nerve damage, and a network of scars across her face served as a permanent reminder of the day her world ended. By pre-war medical standards, she should have been on permanent disability, receiving months of rehabilitation therapy. Instead, she was training teenagers to be combat medics in conditions that would have challenged Civil War surgeons. "Listen carefully," she told her class of young volunteers, her voice steady despite the constant ache in her damaged ribs. "A wounded soldier who can still fight is worth 10 healthy ones hiding in shelters. Your job isn't to make them perfect, it's to keep them functional. Stop the bleeding, stabilize the bones, manage the pain, and get them back in action." Her students, kids who should have been worrying about college applications and weekend parties, absorbed every word with the intensity of medical residents. 17-year-old Marcus, his left arm amputated below the elbow after a Valdorian energy blast, took notes with mechanical precision. 16-year-old Sarah, walking on a prosthetic leg fashioned from aluminum pipes and cushioned with foam padding, demonstrated battlefield triage techniques to newcomers. Across the city, similar transformations played out like a species-wide metamorphosis. In Cambridge, Professor Michael Thompson, Harvard's former head of European history, now led urban warfare seminars in the university's bombed-out library, teaching guerrilla tactics he'd learned from dusty military history texts. His lectures on medieval siege warfare had become practical instruction manuals for defenders armed with improvised weapons. In Quincy, grandmother Rose O'Sullivan ran an ammunition manufacturing operation from her basement, despite the hearing loss and trembling hands caused by her proximity to a plasma strike during evacuation. Her knitting circle had become an explosives workshop. Elderly women who once discussed recipes now debated the relative merits of different chemical compounds for maximum alien armor penetration. Construction worker Jake Morrison directed salvage operations throughout Chicago's ruins, his distinctive eye patch and cane marking him as one of the thousands who'd been wounded but refused to quit. His crews, mechanics with prosthetic hands, electricians working despite chronic pain, engineers hobbling on improvised crutches, had transformed the city's wreckage into a labyrinth of defensive positions that channeled alien patrols into carefully prepared kill zones. "They think we'll surrender because we're damaged," Jake explained to his team as they positioned shaped charges beneath the Michigan Avenue overpass, his remaining eye bright with determination. "They don't understand that getting hurt just pisses us off. Every scar is a reminder of why we're fighting. Every injury is proof we're still here." The explosion that followed vaporized an entire Valdorian supply convoy, the fireball visible from orbit. Jake's crew celebrated despite their wounds, despite their exhaustion, despite facing an enemy with technology centuries beyond their own. Across the planet, humanity was discovering something about itself that no species had ever demonstrated: the ability to transform suffering into strength, to convert damage into determination, and to find in their wounds not weakness, but fuel for an unquenchable fire. 6 weeks into what High Command had projected as a 72-hour pacification campaign, Valdorian forces began reporting something that had never appeared in their extensive military archives: systematic psychological deterioration among occupation troops facing a technologically inferior enemy. Patrol leader QIX Tam transmitted his daily operational report with growing desperation, his biomechanical implants struggling to process tactical data that violated every principle of logical warfare. Human resistance patterns continue accelerating beyond predictive models. They no longer engage in direct confrontation, having adapted to our superior firepower advantages. Instead, damaged units execute strategic withdrawal, perform field repairs using primitive but surprisingly effective methodologies, then return to combat with enhanced capabilities derived from studying our own destroyed equipment. The psychological toll on Valdorian forces was reaching critical levels. Their species had evolved for efficient, calculated warfare, swift overwhelming force followed by orderly occupation protocols. Instead, they faced an enemy that seemed to gain tactical sophistication proportionally to the damage inflicted upon them, creating a feedback loop that their military psychology couldn't process. In hidden laboratories scattered across Earth's underground networks, human engineers reverse-engineered Valdorian technology with a speed that defied every assessment of their developmental capabilities. Dr. Ahmad Hassan, working from a converted subway maintenance tunnel beneath Manhattan, led a team of graduate students and self-taught mechanics in breakthrough discoveries that should have taken decades of systematic research. The advantage of desperation, he explained to his assistants while calibrating a captured plasma rifle to interface with human neural patterns, is that survival strips away academic caution. We're attempting modifications that no rational scientist would risk under normal circumstances. His left hand, wrapped in radiation-burned bandages from an earlier experiment, manipulated alien circuitry with steady precision despite nerve damage that left his fingers partially numb. The weapon he'd created, a hybrid of Valdorian plasma technology and human engineering ingenuity, could penetrate alien armor that had previously been invulnerable to Earth's conventional weapons. More importantly, the manufacturing process required only components salvageable from destroyed vehicles and common household electronics. Meanwhile, human military doctrine underwent revolutionary transformation at unprecedented speed. Colonel Rebecca Thompson, commanding resistance forces from a hidden bunker complex in Colorado's Rocky Mountains, issued tactical guidelines that would have been considered insane 6 weeks earlier, operating assumption for all engagements: expect to sustain casualties, plan accordingly, and remember that a wounded human is still a combat-effective human. Injury protocols now emphasize rapid field treatment and immediate return to active duty rather than extended medical evacuation. Her forces had developed combat techniques specifically designed around fighting while damaged. Soldiers trained with simulated injuries, learning to operate weapons one-handed, coordinate tactics while experiencing pain, and maintain unit effectiveness even when traditional command structures collapsed. They discovered that humans could adapt to physical limitations in ways that alien military theory considered impossible. Intelligence analysis from captured Valdorian communications revealed growing confusion among enemy forces. Reports described human units that appeared to become more dangerous after sustaining damage, fighters who used their own injuries as tactical advantages, and resistance cells that treated battlefield wounds not as debilitating setbacks but as learning experiences that improved their combat effectiveness. The Valdorians had conquered 17 civilizations, each following predictable patterns of resistance, decline, and surrender. But they had never encountered a species that treated warfare as an evolutionary pressure, adapting and improving under the stress of combat in real time. Humanity was teaching the galaxy a fundamental lesson. Intelligence combined with determination could overcome almost any technological disadvantage, especially when that intelligence was forged in the crucible of adversity and refined by the refusal to accept defeat. High Commander Zethkar stood before the assembled Valdorian High Council via quantum-entangled communication array, his normally immaculate ceremonial armor stained with the bioluminescent stress secretions that his species produced during extreme psychological pressure. The conquest of Earth, originally scheduled as a routine 72-hour operation to be completed between more significant military campaigns, had consumed 8 weeks of intensive warfare and was now threatening to become the longest single-planet engagement in Valdorian military history. Honored council members, he began, his mental emanations carrying undertones of confusion, frustration, and something approaching professional respect. I must report a situation that requires immediate xenopsychological analysis and potential revision of our standard conquest protocols. The 12 members of the High Council, each representing millennia of galactic military experience, projected skeptical attention through the quantum link. These were beings who had overseen the subjugation of entire star systems, who had witnessed the fall of civilizations that had existed for geological ages. Council Primarch Vorthan's mental signature carried imperial impatience. Surely you exaggerate the significance of this primitive world's resistance, Commander. No species has maintained organized military opposition after losing 87% of their infrastructure and sustaining casualty rates exceeding 80% of their original military capacity. That statistical impossibility is precisely what makes these humans extraordinary, Zethkar replied, simultaneously transmitting tactical data streams that painted a picture of unprecedented warfare. Observe the behavioral patterns. A human soldier with a completely severed leg fabricated a functional prosthetic from salvaged alien technology and returned to active combat within 4 standard cycles. A pilot suffering third-degree plasma burns across 60% of her body continued flying reconnaissance missions despite constant pain that would incapacitate most sentient species. Their medical personnel treat severe battlefield trauma not as justification for retirement from military service, but as engineering problems to be solved. Science observer Nextol, the Council's chief xenobiologist, added his analysis through supplementary data channels. We have conducted extensive monitoring of human communications, behavioral patterns, and physiological responses during combat operations. The species demonstrates a psychological phenomenon we have never previously encountered. They derive motivational energy from adversity itself. Physical damage, rather than diminishing their combat effectiveness, appears to catalyze increased determination, tactical creativity, and unit cohesion. The Council chamber fell into quantum silence, a phenomenon rarer than neutron star collisions in Valdorian political discourse. For beings accustomed to predictable patterns of conquest, the implications were staggering. Are you suggesting, Primarch Vorthan finally transmitted, his mental emanations tinged with disbelief, that this species becomes more formidable when wounded rather than less so? Not merely more formidable, Zethkar confirmed, sharing battlefield recordings that showed human units fighting with increasing sophistication after sustaining massive casualties. More creative, more unified, more tactically adaptive. We have inadvertently engaged the first intelligent species in our galactic survey that treats warfare as an accelerated evolutionary process rather than a simple test of technological superiority. The recordings showed scenes that challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligent behavior. Humans teaching combat techniques to wounded comrades, soldiers continuing to fight with injuries that should have been permanently disabling, and entire populations adapting to warfare with speed that suggested evolutionary pressure was being applied in real time. Furthermore, Nextol added, their capacity for technological adaptation exceeds our predictive models. They are reverse engineering our weapons systems and improving upon them using principles we never considered. Yesterday, human forces deployed energy weapons based on our own plasma technology but modified to be 23% more efficient than our original designs. For the first time in their species' recorded history, the Valdorian High Council faced a conquest that was teaching them more than they were imposing. The Valdorian fleet hung in Earth's orbit like a constellation of regret, their biomechanical hulls reflecting the blue-white light of humanity's homeworld with something approaching melancholy. 8 weeks of what should have been the most routine conquest in 3 millennia of galactic expansion had fundamentally altered not just military doctrine, but the very philosophical framework through which the Valdorian Empire understood intelligence and civilization. High Commander Zethkar walked through the medical bay of his flagship, Dominion's Edge, observing his own wounded soldiers with eyes that now saw their situation through a radically different lens. Valdorian medical doctrine classified injured personnel as non-combatants requiring immediate removal from operational zones. The logical approach, preserve resources, minimize risk, maintain unit efficiency through systematic replacement of damaged components. But logic, he was discovering, represented only one approach to survival among intelligent species. Commander, Vexmol reported, his mental emanations carrying something unprecedented in Valdorian military communications, genuine admiration for an enemy force. The humans have begun coordinated multi-continental attacks on our supply lines using weapons constructed entirely from our own destroyed equipment. The tactical coordination is being maintained by soldiers who, by our medical assessments, should be receiving intensive care in protected facilities. Zethkar reviewed the incoming battlefield data with something approaching awe. Footage showed human resistance fighters, many bearing visible wounds, prosthetic limbs, and improvised medical devices, executing complex military operations with precision that exceeded many professional armies he had faced. A woman directing urban warfare tactics while supported by crutches. A man coordinating airstrikes despite severe facial burns that would have blinded most species. Children who should have been refugees instead serving as communication specialists and technical support. Sir, Science Observer Nextol added, his voice carrying tones of scientific fascination, our xenopsychological analysis suggests these humans have discovered something profound about the relationship between adversity and adaptation. They don't simply endure damage, they incorporate it into their operational effectiveness. Their injuries have become tactical advantages, their pain a source of strategic motivation. In 8 weeks of combat, Zethkar had learned more about the nature of warfare than in 3 centuries of conquest. The humans had taught him that victory wasn't merely about superior firepower, technological advantage, or tactical supremacy. It was about the willingness to continue existing when existence itself became a choice rather than an assumption. "Prepare withdrawal coordinates for the entire fleet," he commanded quietly, his words carrying through the ship's neural network with the weight of historical significance. His staff's mental emanations exploded with confusion and disbelief. "Commander. We maintain overwhelming technological superiority. Victory remains mathematically achievable through sustained bombardment. We came to conquer Earth," Zethkar explained, studying a display showing human activity across the planet's surface, rebuilding, adapting, preparing for whatever challenge would come next, but Earth has conquered something within us. These humans have demonstrated that the universe contains forms of strength we never imagined possible. To continue this campaign would require us to destroy something precious and irreplaceable, the first species we have encountered that exemplifies the concept of unconquerable spirit. As the Valdorian fleet powered their hyperspace drives and prepared to depart, their sensors detected unprecedented activity across Earth's surface. Despite everything, humanity was already rebuilding. Not just infrastructure or military capacity, but rebuilding with improvements based on lessons learned during the occupation. They were incorporating alien technology, adapting battlefield innovations to peacetime applications, and preparing for future challenges with the systematic determination of a species that had discovered its own potential under extreme pressure. Commander Zethkar composed his final operational report for the High Council Archives. Species designation: human. Status: unsuitable for conquest. Classification: protected species of exceptional xenobiological interest. Recommendation: avoid future military contact unless seeking to study the phenomenon of intelligence that derives strength from adversity. Critical note for future reference. Never underestimate a species that fights harder when wounded, adapts faster when challenged, and grows stronger when damaged. As Earth diminished to a point of light in the viewport, Zethkar experienced something his species had never encountered in 3 millennia of galactic dominance: humility. The humans had lost every major engagement by traditional military metrics. Their infrastructure lay in ruins, their casualties were catastrophic, their technological disadvantage was absolute. But somehow, in losing everything measurable, they had won something far more valuable: the respect of an enemy who finally understood that some victories transcend the battlefield, and some defeats are actually triumphs that change the universe itself. End of story. The Valdorians learned that day what humanity had always known: it's not about how hard you can hit, but how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from avoiding damage, but from refusing to let damage define you.